In 1989, in the midst of a summer filled with Batman, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, The Abyss, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and Dead Poets Society, director Spike Lee released his monumental masterpiece, Do the Right Thing. Quickly it became a renowned classic, rightfully called one of the greatest films of all time, analyzed countlessly to this day due to its themes on racism, community, and morality, which are still timely even to this day, 30 years later. It is fairly tempting for someone like me to cynically rant about how racism is the scourge of the English-speaking world, based solely on our history of being former English colonies. But this film takes place over one day in a multicultural street in Bedford-Stuy. Here we have African Americans, Italian Americans, Latino, Koreans, and our current president.
Hey, yo! Oh, don't be fucking with the water now.
We came very close with health care. Unfortunately, John McCain decided to vote against it at the last minute. You'll have to ask John McCain why he did that.
Two black kids, they shocked me with the fire hydrant. They ruined my car. Look, this is an antique. They got me fucking soaked.
Yeah,
Where are they?
that's
Brilliant
him.
fucking question.
That's what
They
he's
ran
always
away.
been. It is indeed tempting for a lesser director, black or even white, to view all non-blacks as petulant racist assholes. This is where Do the Right Thing shines above all other films on race, in my opinion. Out of all of the memorable characters of this one block, across all ethnicities, we don't see any real good guy or bad guy. This is a movie about a community of people. The movie is smarter than to portray one group of people as being clearly superior to another. In this one small area of New York City, Brooklyn specifically, everyone is capable of good and bad. And we see this throughout the film. There are so many factors with this film, such as the filmmaking, the dialogue, political themes, and references to America's troubled history with racism. So much for the viewer to think about after seeing the film, but I personally just want to ask a simple question on a human level. Out of all the unforgettable characters we have seen, known, and loved, who did the right thing and do the right thing? Keep in mind, this is just my opinion as a longtime fan of the movie. I first saw it as a teenager, around 15 years or so, and I have loved it since. Set during the hottest day in the summer, and summers are hot as everyone knows, of course. But in New York City, it can get genuinely boiling. I can tell you from experience being there during the summer. It's no wonder why some people can't think straight, both in real life and in this one day. Even though the opinions stated in this video are my own, allow me to take two things from director and actor Spike Lee. One of them is that the police at the end, of course, did not do the right thing. Choking Radio Raheem was, and still is, completely unacceptable. In fact, this brutality was one of the reasons why the police banned the chokehold. Or not. I have no fucking idea.
I know the cops did the wrong thing, that's for sure. And what's sad is that they continue to do the wrong thing and nothing ever happens.
The reason they were called was because Radio Raheem got into a row with Sal over playing his music loudly inside Sal's Pizzeria. He joins Buggin Out's boycott, who, rewinding backwards, also got into a fight with Sal over, of course, the lack of African American pictures upon Sal's wall. All of the pictures are of Italian American people, despite the majority of the customers being black.
Brothers up on the wall.
Man, ask Sal, right?
Hey, Sal, how come we got no brothers up on the wall here?
American Italians on the wall only.
This is the main conflict of the story.
The first link in the chain of disaster.
Man, I want some brothers up on the wall, man.
I gotta work here, man. You fucking my shit up,
And this is
man.
between me and Sal, man.
To me, it seems like Buggin Out is taking a personal issue and blowing it into a race statement. Buggin, as a character, I view him in two ways. When I first saw the film, the character reminded me of a friend of mine who's on the autism spectrum. He had a similar uppity attitude that was almost funny, yet at the same time kind of troubled by the world around him, having to hang around his brothers, those that are like him. But as an adult, I see this character somewhat differently. Now, I see him as a predecessor to the social justice warriors we see so often nowadays. Almost like the African-American version of Rick from The Young Ones. I am not saying that Spike Lee ripped off British comedy, but Buggin Out and Rick do share strong similarities. Same easily triggered personalities, same overeagerness to make things political, and not to mention similar bad haircuts. He goes about the blog asking every black man he could find, and everyone refuses.
Right, that's it. I'm gonna kill myself. Then you'll be sorry.
No, we won't.
One might wish Buggin was as genuinely petulant as his white British counterpart. Of course, due to our history, this incident, which could have been much better handled by both parties, unfortunately has to have some baggage to it. By the way, can we look at the incredible fact that the same actor who plays Buggin Out also played Gus on Breaking Bad? That does bring out the question, what would Buggin Out do with a light green box cutter, if you know what I mean?
You know, if you really tried hard, Buggin Out, you could direct your energies in a more useful way, you know?
On to Radio Raheem. He doesn't do much except walk around playing his music loudly. He is friendly with Mookie, but apart from him, Raheem just plays that big damn boombox everywhere, even when he walks into Sal's Pizzeria.
No service till you turn that shit off. You are disturbing me. You are disturbing my customers!
It could be argued that Sal should have been more polite and not shout so much to Radio Raheem. That is bad service on most occasions, but with a grown man playing his music so loudly indoors, one cannot help but raise his voice to dominate the sound. Am I right? Am I right?
Well, tell me, Radio Raheem to turn down my box and shit, man, and didn't even say please.
Well, neither did you, Raheem.
2 slices.
So, Radio, while he isn't the best person, I am even tempted to actually say he wasn't a man good enough to be viewed as some form of martyr to begin with. But his worst moments did not, I repeat, did not call for someone to kill him in a chokehold. Anyone can agree with that.
Gary, that's enough! Gary, that's enough!
Well, Smiley, come here, man.
Smiley, I can say with confidence, is the most sympathetic out of the 3 boycotters. A mentally challenged man who wanders the neighborhood with pictures of Dr. King and Malcolm X. Of course, Spike Lee would make a film on Malcolm X, but let's not get ahead. Anyway, Smiley's personality reminds me strongly of special needs people I knew growing up. So naturally I tend to side with genuinely innocent people like him, especially when the poor man is bullied by Pino. Unlike the others who are in this due to a personal cause, Smiley seems like the one who is trying to do the right thing in his own mind. And I emphasize trying, of course, because even Smiley ends up swearing at Pino and spitting on Sal. And out of everyone, it is Smiley who fulfills Buggin Out's intentions and puts some brothers onto that wall. Now let's talk about our main character, Mookie. Spike Lee, the director and writer and producer, of course, does a good job portraying the average young man just trying to live one day at a time and get his money's worth at the end of the day. He is far from the moral center of the story, and I really believe that he isn't actually the protagonist among this diverse cast. Now, did he do the right thing? Before we talk about that, I have to mention that Spike Lee's role in the film itself. People who take up the role of actor, producer, director, and the writer positions all at once kind of get a bad rap, because with quite a few of these auteurs, you do get the sense that the only reason they're taking in so many key roles in their own films is solely to make themselves look better than they really are.
You are tearing me apart, Lisa!
I don't see this with Spike Lee and Do the Right Thing at all. He has bigger issues than his personal ego to talk about. The fact that Spike Lee isn't the first actor mentioned in the opening credits is more than enough to justify that fact. By the way, these opening titles are among the best I have ever seen. Once you see Rosie Perez dancing, you are hooked from the start. As for Rosie Perez's character, Tina, I see her as somewhat of a MacGuffin, someone or something that moves the story forward, but doesn't seem as important to the main story itself. Although I will admit, Rosie Perez might have the sexiest debut of any actress I can think of. Tina is so hot, indeed.
Because you don't fucking listen, Mookie! If you listen to me, I wouldn't have to repeat myself like a fucking radio, alright?
But I digress. What about when Mookie threw the trash can into the window? Why did he do that? As a Caucasian myself, I am very aware that Spike Lee has mentioned that no black man has ever asked that question. So I'm here to answer that for you. He throws the can into the window and then just sits back and allows the people to destroy the place. Minutes earlier, he was all ready to get paid and go home, but then the group of kids rudely come in, wanting a slice past closing time. Next thing, the boycott comes in and Sal starts yelling at them. They start yelling back, racial insults are thrown, and the anger that everyone has been holding back finally explodes. And to quote Jared Harris of the recent miniseries Chernobyl,
"The chain of disaster is now complete."
Thus starts the fight inside, which causes the police to kill Radio Raheem in front of everyone, including his good friend Mookie. And you ask why he would throw a can into a window after an event like that. But was that the right thing to do? This is actually a surprisingly complex question, because up to the point where he throws the can into the window, he has been acting somewhat like a peacemaker, yelling at both Buggin Out and Sal to quit their bullshit. And now, after a good friend of his has been murdered by the police in an all too common sight, in the end, it's one of those situations in which there may be no why. It's hard for one person to describe such feelings. In the end, after everything that happened that night, it's little wonder Mookie kinda forgot about his money. Until the next morning, that is.
Fuck! Money. Shit!
As for Sal himself, the guy I believe has somewhat of a bad rep. Even though Sal is racist, Spike Lee also admitted that, so let's get that out of the way. I mean, not only does he use the N-word, but why else would he call him, "You black cocksucker," instead of just a plain, "You cocksucker"? Apart from that, Sal is actually more or less a decent man, tolerating the people around him who love his pizza and his business. You see, with tolerance, we're only tolerating the differences in our cultures, but our grudges of those differences will always remain. There's a reason why I made my speech on that theme 4 years ago, and while South Park was the main influence, it was also Sal's tolerance of the African American community that influenced my speech. He does seem like a victim of circumstance in my view, but most of his tragic situations are issues Sal put himself into. Had he told those kids to come back the next day instead of letting them in, the boycott wouldn't have made it into Sal's that night. Had he chose not to bully Buggin further for his obnoxious attitude throughout the course of the day, maybe Sal's Pizzeria might have survived another day. Despite his contempt for the African American population, he is not a greedy asshole who's into a job solely to exploit the black population. Sal loves his business. He enjoys the people that come to his place. He loves what he does, and when his place is destroyed, Sal is devastated, crying out for his destroyed restaurant.
I built this fucking place with my bare fucking hands. Every light socket, every piece of tile, me with these fucking hands.
There is a wonderful scene in which Sal and his eldest son Pino talk at a windowsill.
My friends, they laugh at me. They laugh right in my face. Do your friends put money in your pocket, Pino? Food on your table? They pay your rent, the roof over your head? They're not your friends. If they were your friends, they wouldn't laugh at you.
This scene, honestly, makes me think of me and my father. A similar man with similar morals, but without any of the racism, thankfully. So in short, if you took out his racist side, I see Sal as a good man underneath his macho appearance. Then there are his sons, starting with Pino. If there's a real racist asshole in the film, it's him. Constantly complaining about being in the presence of African Americans, even to the shock of his racist father, let's not forget.
You detest this place like a sickness? I mean, that's like really hate. You know? That's hate.
At times he sounds so genuinely petulant. And let's not forget when he bullied poor Smiley. However, it was him who stopped his father with Buggin Out the first time. The racist son, who should be happy to see his dad beat up an obnoxious black man with a bat, is the one who takes the bat from his father's hands. And then the younger brother, Vito. He is the okay brother, the guy who's always picked on by his brother. He genuinely likes Mookie and seems like a cool guy. But, like everyone, he does have his limits as the night does show. As for the guys around the wall, they mostly just sit around and comment about whatever's going on in the street corner. They might seem useless, but these guys have some of the best dialogue Spike Lee has to offer.
Either them Korean motherfuckers are geniuses, or you black asses are just plain dumb.
Daisy, I don't know about you, but it's too hot to fuck. Man, you out your fucking mind? It ain't never too hot or never too cold for fucking.
If this hot weather continues, it's going to melt the polar caps and the whole wide world.
Hell no, goddammit. Sal ain't never done nothing to you before, man, and me neither. Hear me? What you ought to do is boycott that goddamn barber that fucked up your head.
You gotta love that shit. They show displeasure to Raheem's constant radio playing, yet they are upset by his unnecessary death.
It's as plain as day. They didn't have to kill the boy.
Next, after Sal's been trashed, they almost turn upon the Korean shop picker and his family, only to back away at the last minute.
Same be black. Open your eyes, motherfucker.
Leave the Korean alone, man. He's all right.
Thank God sense came to them, even if it was somewhat awkwardly. The Koreans were completely innocent from the Sal affair, despite showing frustrations to rude customers speaking in a language they don't fully understand yet. Then there are the group of kids. They just hang around rooftops, on the curb. They even get into a spat with the mayor like entitled black people. Now this does sound like a strange term, entitled black, especially coming from a white man, but these kids grew up in a completely different world from the mayor. A world not free of racism, but Ahmad certainly doesn't know of the hardships of Jim Crow and the segregation that the mayor certainly experienced. Why else would his 5 hungry children be crying for bread in a society that glares down upon the African Americans? A society that Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X fought against. They seem complacent and even ignorant of the civil rights struggles of the previous generation. When the boycott arrives at Sal's that night, the kids are on Sal's side. But once Sal drops a certain word, even during the fight, the girl is crying and screaming hysterically at her friends to stop. But sadly, it is too late. Everyone at Sal's Pizzeria that night were literally too flamingly enraged to stop the incoming disaster. As for Mr. Senior Love Daddy, the radio man played by Samuel Jackson, he mostly observes the actions going on outside all day, making witty commentary, similar to the guys on the wall, except less frequently. And if you want anyone to interrupt a race rant montage, it's Samuel L. motherfucking Jackson.
You need to cool that shit out. And that's the double truth, Ruth.
Sadly, though, no one takes his advice, and by the end, everyone's yelling at each other and tearing up Sal's place, leaving Love Daddy angry and with some surprisingly powerful words the next morning.
Are we gonna live together? Together, are we gonna live?
Now to answer the question, who did the right thing? I'm going to take the other advice Spike gave and agree that it was the mayor who did the right thing. Taking the form of a sad drunk, the mayor, played by the late great Ozzie Davis, is the true moral core and heart of the film.
Always do the right thing.
And more importantly, he is the only character who actively strives to live by this philosophy. Sure, he can be cranky at times, and does seem like a useless lowlife, being constantly rejected by mother sister, but he and Sal have a good relationship, with the mayor happily sweeping out the streets for his neighbor. Later, he runs into the road to save the kid Eddie from a car, and even chastises his mom for her overreaction. Finally, during the riot, he is quick to approach the fight, calling to break it up.
If we don't stop this and stop it now, we're gonna do something we're gonna regret for the rest of our lives.
Next, when the riot is underway, he brings the protesting Sal and sons to safety, even though the family does have some issues with the mayor's people. But the mayor don't care. All he wants is for everyone to get along, like all men should. I cannot help but ponder, what happened to everyone after the next morning? What happened between Mookie and Tina? Did they ever get back together? And what about his situation with his sister? Is he still bumming today? What happened with Sal's boys? Does Vito inherit his elder brother's intense racism as a result of their business being destroyed? Do the mayor and mother-sister form a relationship afterwards? What happened to Buggin Out after he got arrested? Did he ever get out? These questions do not matter in the long term because the film is so masterful, it gives out just enough to think about in the length span of at least a full day movie time, which was as perfectly intended, alongside many things. The biggest lesson of Do the Right Thing, in my opinion, is that if we are all to live in a happier, more accepting world, then we have to be open and aware of not just one side, but of all, both the good and the bad. Otherwise, if we refuse to talk about the inconvenient and uncomfortable truth and keep quiet, even for a nice or polite cause, it will simmer and simmer underneath like a hot day on Bedford-Stuy, until it all explodes in permanent disasters. If we pretend that nothing's wrong in a situation that common sense would command a decent person to say or do something about it, there will be more disasters like Sal's famous pizzeria. And that's the ultimate truth! Ruth! To close things off, I should mention the 2 quotes at the end. One from Dr. Martin Luther King and one from Malcolm X. Of course, the 2 civil rights leaders featured on Smiley's picture. One, by King, is a steadfast declaration against all forms of violence. The other, by Malcolm, argues the need for violence for certain situations in self-defense. People have took this as the movie being unable to make up its mind with a confusing message on race relationships. I don't see that at all. The whole film, of whom has been open to the viewpoints of all the people of many ethnicities and cultures, whether their opinions were the right thing or not. With that in mind, it is obvious that this film will present the message of both civil rights leaders and shows both the good and the bad of both paths. And thus, I end this video of Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing with a quote by the late great Roger Ebert, in which he finished his review by saying, "A third from Rodney King ran through my mind." You know who I'm talking about.
I just want to say, you know, can we all get along? Can we get along? Can we all 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 get along?